Alright guys, welcome to another video from XF Motorsports. We are working on the Skyline GTR again today, and we are really hoping that this one would be the last video we have to make on the Skyline, because well, this engine was rebuilt previously by someone only 400 kilometers ago, but he had messed up everything on the engine. All the clearances were wrong, none of the valves were sealing properly, and it has taken a really long time to get this engine back to somewhat of a condition where we think that everything will work properly. So in this video we're going to be completing the engine rebuild on it, putting everything back together, putting it back in the car, then retuning everything, because it is going to need like a full tune again, because the previous tune was obviously done on valves that were leaking and all these issues that the engine had before. So in the previous video we started off by putting the RB26 back together with the new crankshaft, measuring all the clearances and making sure that everything was done properly this time. But when we got to the head, we realized that the person that had rebuilt this engine previously had also messed up on the head, and all the valves on the engine were actually leaking, and in fact they weren't even making proper contact with the valve seats. So after that we started off by taking off the old head and throwing it in the garbage. After that we got to the other used head that the owner had, and we took all the valves out of that. That also was not sealing initially just because it was dirty, so we had to reseat all the valves, clean up everything and put it back together, and that was enough to get that head working properly. So here is how far we've gotten with the engine so far. These are the bigger injectors, Bosch injectors, 1000cc. The previous injectors we tried was Injector Dynamics 1050, but those were a horrible fit on this engine. All the connectors were cheap and we were having connection issues. That's why we didn't use those ones, but these ones already seem like a better fit and everything, so yeah, I'm optimistic that these ones will do a good job. Turbos are still the same ones that were on the engine before, Garrett 2860-5, and these are going to be the limiting factor of power on this engine, because all the rest of this engine has like 900 horsepower internals and everything, and it should be really strong. But the turbos are a little on the small side, but these were new turbos that the owner had bought right before the rebuilds, and they're still pretty new. They have no shaft play, almost no shaft play, and everything is fairly new, so that's why we don't want to throw these away right now and go with different ones. But yeah, the point is that we're going to run these turbos to the max, see what the flow limit is on these and how much power they give us, and once of course the owner gets sick of these turbos and he wants more power, it will be as simple as just putting bigger turbos, and the rest of the engine is already good for a lot of power. And while we were along the way working on this engine, we've also upgraded the oil pump. It's a Tome oil pump now. Before that, this was a factory oil pump with different gears inside it. The gears were still better than the factory oil pump, but this one is also going to flow more than the factory one, so hopefully it's gonna help this engine stay more reliable at higher power levels. So yeah, that's what we have on the engine so far. Next, the place that we have to get to is mounting the oil pan, the valve covers. Also working on this drain that we've added from the head to drain oil back to the pan. And yeah, after that the engine is pretty much going to be done, and it's going to be time to put it back in the car. So after putting the valve covers on, we flipped the engine over, and that's when we opened the second can of worms this stupid mechanic had left for us. The oil heat exchanger, he had for some reason taken a Dremel and drilled a hole through it so that the engine oil and coolant basically never exchange temperatures. But I have no idea what his logic was behind it. He for some reason thought that this would keep the engine oil temperatures cooler, but of course now it was time to fix it. So we had to go with another used part to replace it, and then of course put everything back together the way it should be. So after that, it was finally time to get to the oil pan. For this one we also did put Tome baffles in it, because these engines are known for oil starvation in high g-forces, so the baffles basically give the engine a better fighting chance if you're taking this car to the track. So after that, it was on to a few wires, and then finally flipping the engine over, taking it off the engine stand and then mating it with the transmission. Once all that was put together, it was time to put the engine and transmission on the subframe, bolt it up with the engine mounts, and then finally drop the car on the engine and transmission and basically, yeah, put everything back in the car. Once the engine and transmission were back in the car, there was a lot of putting back together to do, starting with the drive shafts, the front drive shafts for the 4-wheel drive, all the million hydraulic lines that go in this car for the Hikes 4-wheel steering, 4-wheel drive system, and a whole bunch of other unnecessary things that were added to this car, like gauges and, yeah, stupid mods that people had done over time. To make my job even more difficult, by the time I got to connecting up the AccuSump, I realized that the guy who had rebuilt the engine was the same person that installed the AccuSump, and he had connected it all wrong. He had connected it in a way that the AccuSump actually takes pressure from the engine, but when the engine is actually starving on oil, it actually doesn't give any pressure at all back to the engine. So no idea what the logic was behind that again, and that's exactly why last time when the engine blew, it was sitting there with 0 psi, even though the AccuSump had 100 psi and it did nothing at all, didn't give the engine any oil pressure. But of course, after fixing up the connection, the AccuSump did started working, and even with the engine turned off, it would actually give 100 psi of oil pressure, so that was all good. Okay, there it is. The engine is finally back in the GTR, all connected together, and this was honestly the most difficult car I've ever worked on, not only because it was a difficult car to begin with, but also because all these years of people messing with literally everything, adding these ground wire kits and hoses and like AccuSumps that were all connected wrong, and it was honestly so much work fixing all these mistakes and everything done on this car that it's taken way longer than what I expected, and it's taken even longer than what the customers expected, and their cars have been waiting around for such a long time. So yeah, it's getting really late now. It's like, what time is it? It's well, 1:30, and it's probably going to be even longer before I leave tonight because I still need to do a compression test on it. But yeah, I don't really care at this point how long it takes, but this is the last day I want this car in this shop. I just want to get everything done, even if I have to stay here the whole night, and yeah, just finish up on everything. So yeah, basically now I have to do a compression test, try to start the engine and see how much compression it's making, which I'm pretty sure at this point should be normal. After that, it's just going to be a matter of putting all the ignition coils back in, and then there's a bit of programming to do in the Haltech for this new trigger system that is connected on the front of the engine, and also the bigger fuel injectors, and also, yeah, there's pretty much, it's like a full ECU tune now because there's so much that has changed on the engine that the older tune is pretty much useless. So yeah, there's still quite a bit of work to do on this car. Let's start off by the compression test and really hope that I do get done with all this tonight. So as it turns out, I was not able to fix the GTR that night. I ran into a few more issues, and well, the next day the really difficult decision had to be made to tow the GTR back to the person's place because there were a lot of cars stacking up and there was a lot of work I had to get done in the shop. But I did end up going to the guy's place in my own time after I was done with work, and after that I got the car running at his place and we got the engine started. We took the car out and did a bit of street tuning on it, and sure enough, everything worked out, but there was only one issue. The car wasn't making proper vacuum. The compression levels was pretty low. They were around 145, much higher than on the previous blown engine, but still not as high as it should have been. So I pointed my finger on the valve clearance, that it was not set properly. That's why the compression was low, but of course at that point the owner didn't want me to change anything on the valves or the valve clearance or anything, so that's why we made the decision to take the car to the dyno anyways, and of course that dyno session did not go too well. So here's the results at the end of the day. The last time we were here, this car made about, well, this is like 340 wheel horsepower, but that's the graph from before. This is what the car's making this time after rebuilding the engine and everything. Only 240 horsepower, that's it. So yeah, there's a bit of an issue with the valve. Well, yeah, I think I kind of suspected this one because the valve clearances we were getting this time when we rebuilt the engine, it was extremely small. So I thought the shims were definitely wrong, and yeah, it turns out they probably would be wrong judging by the power numbers.
So after doing a few runs on the dyno, I told the owner that the engine is just not going to work like this. It's not going to make proper power. So finally, yeah, he did listen, and we did end up taking the car back to the shop then and revisiting the valves, checking the valve duration and everything. And this time I actually drew everything on a piece of paper so I could explain to him what was going on. And well, basically also to explain to you guys the issue, this was the whole duration of the intake stroke. That was the whole duration of the exhaust stroke, or well, the time that the exhaust valves were open. And this tiny space over here was a compression stroke, and that tiny space was a power stroke. And yeah, basically more than half the time the valves were just open all the time. So the compression stroke and power stroke were so small that the engine obviously wouldn't be making any compression. And basically what was going on was that these were really aggressive cams, and in addition to that, the valve clearances were so tiny that yeah, it was just giving a ridiculous amount of valve duration. It was 330 degrees of valve duration, which is why yeah, everything was just not working properly. So yeah, of course, after explaining everything to the owner, we did make the decision to go back to the stock cams and also set the valve clearances properly like this engine comes from the factory. So after that, finally the compression levels picked up to normal, and also the engine started making proper vacuum. And after that, we took the car back to the dyno again, and this time, of course, the car ran properly.
Okay, so the GTR is back to the dyno at Mantis for the third time now, actually. So this time I'm hopeful that it should make its proper power because we've changed the cams, we've done quite a lot on it, made sure the valve timing is fine. So what are your power goals this time?
470.
470? I say about 430. Our power goals are getting lower every time we come back here, but
so this time finally the car did run after run super reliably, giving consistent power numbers and everything, and temperatures were perfectly well. In fact, the only thing that overheated this time was the dyno. We did so many runs on the dyno that the dyno kept overheating after a few runs, and we actually had to put the fans on the dyno rather than on the car to actually cool it back down.
okay, this time finally it seems like the car is starting to run consistently. The good sign is that the car is doing pull after pull and nothing's going wrong on the car, but the dyno is overheating now. So yeah, we were giving it a bit of a break, cooling down the dynos, and after that we're going to be going even higher on the boost and seeing how much power the car makes.
So of course we started off by doing low boost runs, running about 14 psi of boost, and slowly we kept stepping up the boost, but right about the region where we started crossing 20 psi, the dynographs started looking a little weird, and at first we weren't sure what was exactly going on, but later on we actually realized that it was the stupid blow-off valve on the car that couldn't really hold the pressure after like a certain pressure, and the blow-off valve would literally start opening and it would let all the pressure out.
Yeah.
Now on a normal car that wouldn't be such a big problem because you can just crank the blow-off valve, the spring on it slightly tighter, and then it would start holding more pressure, but for some stupid reason the blow-off valves on this car were located right behind the bumper, and there was actually no place to access it without taking the bumper off or without like taking a few covers from underneath the car off. So because none of that was an option, we couldn't really get consistent numbers on the car at higher boost levels. So yeah, the final number that the car gave us was 408 wheel horsepower, but that of course is not an accurate number because of course you can see on the run that halfway through the run the blow-off valve did open and it let all the boost out, which is why the torque and horsepower fall down so much midway. But nonetheless, even with this issue, I was able to figure quite a lot of the tune out, and after that, of course, the owner himself was able to tighten the blow-off valve, which also fixed that issue.
So after a few days, the Skyline is back, and now apparently the blow-off valve is fixed. The blow-off valve, it was just a matter of adjusting it to a higher pressure, so now it doesn't open anymore. So yeah, let's get inside the car. I haven't seen it after, like, I haven't been in the car after the blow-off valve got fixed, so let's see how it feels now. It's a lot faster now. Now it's holding the boost. Oh man, spins all four wheels in second gear. That's crazy, that's insane. Oh my god, it squirms all over the place. Do you think you still need more power? Yeah. There's one thing looking at the numbers, but then when you get inside the car and actually feel like what that feels like.
Because now everybody throws out big numbers.
Yeah. Spins the wheels so easily.
Very linear.
Yeah. That's amazing. It feels like a completely different car now.
And no backfiring and no
Yeah.
buffer smoke or anything.
Yeah. Honestly, it doesn't feel too weird like being on the wrong side of the road and driving it.
No, after a while,
Yeah, you get used
the
to it.
brain, your brain just switch.
Yeah. Oh, the clutch feels weird though. The clutch definitely takes a little bit of getting used to. I wasn't even ready for it. The first gear just went by so quick. It's like you have to be really fast with the gear shift. You have to when the boost comes.
You have to catch it every time.
From 4,000 to 8,000, it's just like not even a second. Right when it hits 4,000, it's like the next thing you see is 8,000. You don't expect that. Second gear, you're just going along and it starts spinning all four wheels. It's insane. Quick shout out for this video goes to AutoWit. They sent me this battery-less supercapacitor jump starter. So basically it's a jump starter. You can connect these two leads to the battery of your dead car and this thing will be able to start the car. The difference between this one and other jump starters is that this one is based on a supercapacitor. So when this thing runs out of charge after starting your car, you can hook this thing up to the battery of another car using these two terminals, and this thing apparently should be able to charge itself up in a matter of like 1 or 2 minutes. But yeah, let's put this thing to the test. Let's try it out on, I guess, my car first and see if it actually works. So now that the jump starter is charged, next what I'm going to do is that I'm going to disconnect the negative terminal of my battery to see what if this thing alone can start my car or not. So there you go, negative terminal of the battery disconnected. This thing says power on, but I think I have to press this red button again for it to, okay, there, getting ready. It's gonna give me that much time, and after this time I need to go and start my car right away, I believe. So let's see when the countdown ends. After that I'll turn power on and then see if it actually starts. There we go. Oh, there. Wow, that's pretty cool. That is cool. That little thing was able to start the whole car. So definitely a pretty cool product. I'm really surprised that this little thing was able to start up the whole car compared to how small it is compared to the size of the battery. It did only give 2 starts before it died, but that's still good enough because considering this is a big Mercedes V8 engine, so
If we can start this, it will probably be able to work on your regular Mercedes and even other cars. So yeah, definitely a really cool product. I'm definitely going to be keeping one in my car, and if you guys also want to keep one in your car, I will leave a link in the description below. Other than that, yeah, let's get back to the video. So that was everything for the Skyline GTR, but giving you guys a quick sneak of the next Nissan that is going to be hitting the dyno. It's this one. This is an engine from a 300ZX, that car over there. It's Sebastian's car. We are putting bigger turbos on it, even bigger turbos than the Skyline had. These are going to be GT 600 gear turbos. Also extremely happy with how things went with the GTR. It was a lot of work fixing up that car because of all the things that the bad mechanics had done over the years, but now finally it's a car that is running reliably. Since like 10 years the person had that car, he was not able to even drive the car or enjoy the car. Now finally he actually drives it every day. He has actually driven it 2,000 kilometers since the engine was rebuilt. So also making good power. Not the best dyno numbers because of that blow-off valve issue. We never really got to see the full potential on the dyno, but with the blow-off valve fixed, I wouldn't be surprised that even if we head back to the dyno now, it would probably make another like 60 or 70 wheel horsepower, or maybe even above that. So, and yeah, other than that, progress on the E55 manual swap is also going along. Still on the clutch pedal, it just needs that, and after that this car will also be driving. Just waiting for a few parts on that one, so expect that video to be out soon too, maybe in a week or two from now. Other than that, yeah, that's everything for now. Thanks a lot for watching. I will see you guys in the next one.